Remember that time Matt Mercer played Ganondorf?
Hyrule will bow down before me.
No, not that time. I meant the first time.
Hyrule was a great nation. Men lived and died by the sword. They protected or damned their families by the weight of their sack.
Back in 2009 and 2010, Matt Mercer directed and acted in There Will Be Brawl, a dark and gritty fan series for Super Smash Bros. Brawl that he co-created with writer Zach Grafton. The name obviously comes from There Will Be Blood, though the plot is more aligned with something like Watchmen, which the creators have called a direct inspiration. This shoestring budget web series follows hard-boiled, not really a detective but act-like-it Luigi, who lives with his brother Mario in the vaguely defined, filmed-in-Los Angeles capital city of the Mushroom Kingdom. He lives a glum life of wandering around in a trench coat and monologuing about how dark the world has become ever since the cannibal serial killer Kirby went on a murder spree that claimed the life of Daisy. When a new slew of killings begin, Princess Peach is abducted yet again, and Luigi sets off on a mission to find her and stop the city from descending into a bloody gang war. I will be spoiling the show in this video, by the way, so watch it first if you care. There Will Be Brawl came from a time when social media was still young and more driven by communities than algorithms, and when teens and young adults seemed to be the only people really using it. The former meant a lot of free-ranging creativity, and the latter meant a whole lot of retroactively embarrassing growing pains being aired publicly. This was exacerbated by mid to late 2000s culture having a particularly smug, self-satisfied form of edginess that could have an especially potent stench of childish, insecure posing as mature. And an especially common manifestation of this is, and probably always will be, contorting family-friendly media into gritty, R-rated reimaginings, either as parodies or more self-serious drama. To be fair, I think describing such contortions as adolescent is not necessarily an insult. It represents someone wanting to explore mature subject matter in creative ways, while still clinging to childhood media but maybe having embarrassment about doing so, and not being old enough to enjoy kid-friendly things on their own terms. Cue the C.S. Lewis quote. For a much more in-depth look at this broader topic, I couldn't do any better than the midway point of Jacob Geller's Every Zelda is the Darkest Zelda video. My point in bringing it up here is that gritty reimaginings of family-friendly art are at risk of being so clumsily maximal in their grittiness that they come across as less mature than their original inspirations, and a lot of geek culture of the aughts fell into this trap. It doesn't help that What If Kids Thing Was Dark is a pretty obvious and basic route for interpretation and adaptation. These days, one might be more likely to roll their eyes at the idea of seeing alcoholic Super Mario angrily beat Donkey Kong to death with a hammer in a bar fight. But There Will Be Brawl at least benefits a bit from having come out a little bit before its basic premise was as overdone as it is now, and having recently rewatched the series after noticing that Matt Mercer re-uploaded all of it to his personal YouTube channel, I think There Will Be Brawl manages to transcend that sense of insecurity despite indulging in many of the fanwork tropes of the time that normally indicate its presence. Not to say this web series is without flaws, as even setting aside the inconsistent acting quality, especially early on, or the times the low budget gets really obvious with some of the costumes and prosthetics, there are some story threads that are underdeveloped or don't seem to make much sense. But There Will Be Brawl's straight-laced implementation of certain video game characteristics manages to simultaneously feel tongue-in-cheek while still telling a sincere story. Stuff like Wario tapping the bottom of this box to get its mushroom, or Luigi having to quickly enter his apartment so the Mario Bros. 2 Phanto enemy doesn't get him, or the heroes escaping into the sewer through a big green pipe, are moments where the video game logic is suddenly present in this gritty setting, and it's a goofy visual gag, but it's depicted as a natural part of the world. Nobody turns to the camera and winks about it. When Wario tests this mushroom, the scene plays like a drug deal, but the mushroom itself makes him big, just like the games, instead of acting like a hallucinogen like a lot of dark Mario parodies at the time would have done. There's the obvious Pokemon battles are like dogfighting joke, but trainers Red and Leaf are genuinely good, optimistic people, whose roles counteract that overdone parody trope. It's quite a tightrope to walk, to be funny because it's playing absurd things straight without coming across like it's too self-aware, but being just self-aware enough to not feel adolescently insecure. This goes a long way to avoiding the worst excesses of the stereotypical late-aughts gratification. It helps make the world feel a little more like it used to actually be the bright and happy Nintendo games, but it became corrupted. rather than being some cynical, embarrassed about itself total reimagining from the start. And that fits the overall plot of the story, that things used to be more recognizable and in line with the games until Kirby's rampage. Kirby is the most significant part of this story that is edgy and corrupt from the jump, though the way Hyrule fell and was absorbed into the Mushroom Kingdom is also an independently, well, not gritty, but more mundane and non-gamey element.
Do you know how Hyrule fell?
Your stock.
Stock trading. Economic collapse. The one great nation fell not to barbarians or warlords, but to bureaucracy. Little men in little press suits and little iron collars.
The real world has actively intruded on the Nintendo characters, and those characters are pissed. Given the timing of the series' release, when Nintendo was pushing hard on the Wii and Wii-related gimmicks, often at the expense of many of the series and characters that had been featured in Smash Bros. Brawl, and considering moments like Luigi shaking his head at a Wii Fit bus stop ad, or the description of the big Nintendo Tower as an empty relic that the gods abandoned, it's possible to read this series as symbolically portraying the Wii-era casual game policies as hollowing out the Nintendo classics. While The Legend of Zelda has always been a flagship title for Nintendo, the way web series Hyrule has fallen to economic collapse and been absorbed into the Mushroom Kingdom in a diminished state parallels non-flagship titles like Kid Icarus and F-Zero and Mother being neglected, especially in 2009, and only carrying on in the American public consciousness as Smash Bros. Characters. Now, I can't really find a similarly metatextual way to read Kirby's role as the catalyst for everything going rotten, since it's not like in real life the Kirby series caused Nintendo to hyper-focus on casual games, or the Kirby games scared off Nintendo from their classic titles or anything like that. According to an excellent, criminally underviewed retrospective documentary by Garage Dwelling Frogs, seriously, if you're curious about the making of this series, watch this video. It's really good and it's got interviews with so many of the people involved, including Matt Mercer and Zach Grafton. The series initially came from the fact that Kirby copying Sonic in Smash Bros. Didn't have him copy a hat or piece of clothing like he did for other characters, but instead he seemed to wear the hedgehog's scalp, and so the idea of serial killer Kirby was born. In practice, Kirby and the web series became a walking Hannibal Lecter reference, with a few scenes directly recreating moments from Silence of the Lambs, including the very ending. Though with that said, Kirby has a prior dynamic with Peach and Luigi rather than meeting them during the story, like Lecter meets Clarice Starling, so one might say the series also folds in Will Graham's role in Red Dragon. In some ways, this parody element adds to the dry comedy of the series with images like edgy murderer Kirby and the Lecter mask, but in other ways it undermines the possibility for Kirby to feel like a character of his own. Given Kirby's centrality to the backstory of this series, both in and out of universe, I feel it to be a bit of a shame that the direct parody is so strong it's distracting. Then again, I suppose it's metatextually fitting that his primary character trait is a copy of something else. Textually, it's ironic that the character who copies people is the one who permanently changes and distorts everyone else, warping others into being a little more like him instead of him copying them. The Mario brothers, the two main protagonists of the series, stand alone much better as characters of their own. A brooding, monologuing detective in a trench coat and a substance-abusing, short-tempered bruiser are tropey archetypes as well, but at least they get to be their own spins on the tropes, largely thanks to the texture provided by their original game counterparts. Both of them are treated as washed-up former heroes who have lost whatever social standing they once had, despite their relationships with the still-reigning monarch, Princess Peach. Luigi is still mourning Daisy's murder at the teeth of Kirby, while Mario's downward spiral seems partly triggered by Kirby's rampage and also by the failure of his medical practice. Both seem to have lost hope of being productive members of society again. Also, both have been sleeping with Princess Peach. Mario and Peach are the ones officially in a relationship, but Peach is having an affair with Luigi on the side. Luigi is substituting one princess for another in his grief for Daisy, but separately holds real love and admiration for Peach as evidenced by his internalization of her values. He at once respects her by taking her ideas seriously, and disrespects her by effectively treating her as a mere surrogate for his lost love, like a doll he can project Daisy onto. When Kirby taunts him with the affair, I suspect this is why it's such a sore spot for him.
Was it Peach you wanted? Or was she just the crusty sock into which you relieved your shame?
Though when we first learn of their affair, after it's been going on for a long time in-universe, Luigi acts as if he's just a doll for Peach to use, saying,
"Maybe this is all I'm good for."
Perhaps he's just downplaying his own agency to feel less like he's dehumanizing Peach, or maybe he really is drifting around letting Peach take the lead whenever Mario isn't satisfying her. Meanwhile, in this scene, Peach denigrates herself, so whatever comfort the two are seeking in each other's arms, neither is finding any. Mario never overtly confirms that he knows his brother and girlfriend are hooking up, but he seems to imply he knows when he yells at Luigi,
You will always be her player too!
Seems like everyone knows about the affair. Link and Kirby both use it to taunt Luigi. So it's interesting that if Mario is aware too, he doesn't let it dominate his relationship with his brother, doesn't really let it come between them except in this one intoxicated outburst. He is violently jealous that Pauline is now hooking up with Donkey Kong, but he seems to generally accept Peach cheating on him with his brother, as long as he can feel like he's still Peach's favorite. It's not like he's been faithful anyway, since Pauline mentions he has a habit of running back to her whenever Peach would get kidnapped. Both Mario brothers are self-sabotaging now, doing things they know are wrong and bad for them after personal failures. They're willing to surrender all responsibility of keeping the kingdom together to Princess Peach, and to some extent Link and Zelda.
How many lives must this brawl consume while you two drown yourselves in mushrooms and mega vitamins?
Mario eventually decides to clean himself up, and since we're not shown him relapsing at all, and the delivery of his final line checking in on Luigi seems to convey stability, the language of film is telling us that he's going to be alright. But he was motivated to do this in the first place by the hope of living a better life with Peach when she's rescued, and he doesn't get that future because Peach is not saved. She does not get to be his reward for getting sober, and he does not get to use a life with her as motivation to stay sober. So if he does, it's all up to him, for his own sake. Meanwhile, Luigi has a more subdued arc, ending up more as a witness to everything around him than a real active agent in the climax. This is something Grafton mentioned regretting in the documentary interview. Essentially, Luigi spends the series trying and failing to keep the peace and stop the chaos from spreading, bouncing between characters and gawking as they advance the plot. He gets easily played by Ganondorf. He can't talk Mario down from starting a huge fight. He arrives too late to save Peach. Kirby is the one who kills Ganondorf for him, and when Luigi finally gets to fend off Kirby and the Butchers, Kirby survives. Even in a series focused on Luigi, where Luigi starts off as more functional than his brother, he arguably ends up playing second fiddle to Mario in terms of actually getting things done. Failure is omnipresent throughout the series. All the characters begin defined by failures from their past, and at the end, they pretty much all fail to achieve their goals. But those that survive end up in better places anyway. The characters are forced into better ways to cope with their failures after their initial means, well, failed. Though of course not everyone makes it. Part of me feels like the series is partaking in the long tradition of fridging women with what happens to Peach, but her death is right for this story, a cruel twist on the role the character is already known for in the Mario games. Really, my inclination towards calling it fridging is likely less a reaction to Peach's role on its own, and more a reaction to the fact that the main cast does not feature many other women given full arcs to make up for it. The main cast consists of the playable fighters in Smash Bros. Brawl. There's even an amusing in-joke in the detail that the first three victims of the Butcher we hear about are Mewtwo, Roy, and Pichu, the melee fighters famously left out of Brawl. And in Brawl, the only playable women were Zelda, Peach, and Samus. There Will Be Brawl does feature extra Nintendo characters here and there, mostly as background extras, but occasionally as side characters like Pauline and Pokemon Trainer Leaf, but none of them are major characters, and this means that the miniseries is, like the game, dominated by men. Peach is important as a plot device because her kidnapping drives the story, but then she is literally turned into a dead trophy. Before her kidnapping, she is arguably the most proactive and complex character, aside from maybe Wario, trying to hold the kingdom together and lead the investigation on the Butchers, while being constantly undermined by political rivals, and shamed by hostile reporters like Bowser loyalist Lakitu scrutinizing her private life. She's unfaithful to Mario, likely in part justifying it with his substance abuse, but as I already said, her intimacy with Luigi is also hollow. She is drowning too, and both Mario brothers are too wrapped up in their own pain for her to have a mutually supportive relationship with either of them. And so, she soldiers on with her thankless work. Peach's characterization in the first 2 episodes provides us with a surprisingly detailed portrait of her, which does help us want to see her return safe and cements her death as a tragedy. Samus and eventually Zelda have greater presence from here on out, but less clear character depth, even if there is interesting subtext here and there for both of them. The problem with Zelda is that we aren't given enough time to explore her own disillusionment. Part of this is just because of how the series was made. The first few episodes were tightly focused on Luigi, but the ambition kept growing and growing. The series was written as it went along, expanding in scope, but always limited by being a shoestring budget fan web series, and unable to go back and maybe better seed in or balance certain arcs. So, come the finale, when Zelda finally does get some depth, it's too late to explore it. There's only implications of a more fascinating character that could have been. She's had to abdicate her throne when the Mushroom Kingdom absorbed Hyrule, and now she's the police commissioner, I think? But she resents her fall from power, forming a secret partnership with Ganondorf to get Peach out of the way and put herself back on the throne. We can see the logic of Zelda lost her throne, she wants it back, she's turned bad to get it back, but we don't learn the psychology of how she fell this far in the first place. Unless we're to take her single, spiteful line about Link not being a man anymore as her actual motivation, instead of just a knee-jerk insult in reaction to Link slipping out of her grasp.
I wouldn't need a stronger man if you were still a hero.
If this is her motivation, it reflects even worse on Zelda and the show, making her come across as a shallow gold digger. She's catty to Peach and is in some sort of relationship with Ganondorf, but there's only one scene briefly dedicated to each. This makes Zelda appear relatively one-dimensional until the very end, when she's clearly remorseful for her actions, and then Link convinces her to turn back to the light, and then both of them get immediately killed for their trouble. Similarly, Samus has some interesting subtextual depth, but on the surface comes across as being kind of a stock, sassy stripper archetype. I guess she and Luigi used to hook up, but there isn't much sign of more than friendship during the actual episodes. Her backstory is that after all the bounties dried up for her, she's resorted to stripping, trading her more independent, adventurous profession as a bounty hunter from the games to become an object of desire. It's basically an extended joke about the fact that beating Metroid fast enough made Samus take her armor off in the victory screen, or how in Smash Bros. Brawl, Zero Suit Samus was not a separate character from Armored Samus, she was an alternate form that Samus turned into when she did her final smash and her armor fell off. There are several moments implying that her flirty personality is cover for building more of her own power base as an independent actor within the underworld. Her brief exchange with DDD implies she's trying to carve out territory for herself, but it's more a throwaway line to give her some conflict with him to justify a brief but inconsequential red herring that she might be in league with the Butcher, which she isn't. She gets to suit up for the final battle, so it's easy to interpret her as longing to go back to her old line of work based on this moment, but it's also possible to read her demeanor at the start of the finale as more hesitant about doing this. The rest of the time, she's pretty blasé about her situation, and her territory thing doesn't factor into the finale. I would think there'd be a lot more psychological complexity to explore with a character known for being a mission-focused, armor-clad fighter who is not especially social, now having to make a show of taking that armor off and performing pleasant flirtiness for an audience that wants to see her at her most vulnerable. Did she just throw a working arm cannon at Red during this routine? She clearly retains her edge and cunning adaptability, using her beauty as her chosen tool to try to build a power base for herself, and constructing her sassy stripper persona as a new kind of armor. This is a perfectly fine way to adapt the character for this story, especially since some Metroid ending screens hint that she does have a more laid-back side to her when she's not on mission. But what her situation means to her as a person, how she feels about needing to abandon her original vocation, drop her stoic affect, and shift from an asocial profession to a completely, vulnerably social profession is not explored. She never gets the kind of more directly psychological scene exploring her perspective that's given to Luigi, Mario, Link, and Ganondorf. When the complexity of several men is the text, and the complexity of the few women is there, but mostly in the subtext, then there's a clear imbalance in narrative priority at play. So I guess what I'm saying is that, by the standards of 2009 internet gamer culture, There Will Be Brawl is a genuine bastion of feminism.
Dames.
Because all the characters and the settings suffer rot and degradation, the question of whether the Mushroom Kingdom and its people can be pulled back from the brink is the central theme of this web series. Under this umbrella theme is the decay of the great hero figure, as all of the great Nintendo heroes are forced to adjust to their new gritty world. Mario's medical practice as Dr. Mario has gone under and he's an alcoholic layabout. The Kingdom of Hyrule fell to financial collapse, and now Link and Zelda are demoted to running law enforcement under Princess Peach. Samus's work as a bounty hunter dried up and she's resorted to stripping.
None of us are the heroes we're supposed to be.
Perhaps the characters' awareness of their corruption could be read as a satire of the very concept of the gritty reimagining. But mostly it's there to drive home this theme of degradation within the story itself. Such a narrative could be prone to falling into some nostalgia-poisoned, the solution is for the great heroes of the past to come back and be heroes again and make everything just like it was resolution. Alternatively, it hints that it could go for some saccharine, there is hope in the next generation note that, when done wrong, displaces the responsibility for actually fixing things onto babies and toddlers. But by the final episode, There Will Be Brawl rejects both of these paths, and in doing so ends up reaching a sense of real maturity. The possibility of some revival for heroes and a glorious return of the past is certainly built up to by the end of the 9th episode and start of the 10th. Mario puts himself back together and rallies the underclasses of the Mushroom Kingdom to take back the streets from the gang violence that's consuming it. But the resulting brawl... Hey, there it is, it's the brawl.
There will be brawl? Not anymore. There was a brawl. It just happened.
The resulting brawl with the remnants of Bowser's gang is big and climactic, but ultimately feels pointless when all is said and done. Bowser himself was not the mastermind after all, and even though his army was taking over, after he dies, his forces seem scattered and demoralized.
These sorry suckers don't got nothing left.
There's an implication that Mario's rallied underclasses could take back the streets without needing a big battle. The violence seems to inspire the Game & Watches, acting as an otherworldly, destructive multitude in a manner quite similar to their role in Subspace Emissary, to combine into their final smash and wipe out a ton of the combatants on both sides. Mario gets to heroically destroy it, but by presenting the giant octopus as prompted by the fight, it implies there was a more productive way to foil the end of days plot than letting it happen and just overpowering it.
This is what Ganondorf wants! For you two to kill each other off!
It is, admittedly, pretty unclear what Ganondorf and Olimar's collaboration is meant to be, but my assumption is that they want to empower the Game & Watches with enough human sacrifices to go octopus mode, with Ganondorf planning to sweep away all his rivals and then rebuild from the wreckage and betray Olimar and the Game & Watches when he has to. But this point isn't made clear. Maybe he wants to destroy everything too. At the very least, it is heavily implied that this big brawl between groups that aren't directly working for Ganondorf is counterproductive, and only creates the sacrifices the Game & Watches need, and Mario's greatest feat of heroism is just cleaning up his own mess, while otherwise doing nothing to solve the real problem of Ganondorf and the Butchers. This is similar to how his big, bombastic prison break-in in an earlier episode frees Luigi, Samus, Red, Pit, and other wrongfully imprisoned citizens, but also frees Kirby, which ultimately allows him to escape the events of the series scot-free. Meanwhile, Link finally reclaims his heroism and convinces Zelda to turn back to the good side, but this only gets both of them killed instantly.
I'm at full health.
As much as Bowser, Ganondorf, Link, Mario, and others wax poetic about the lost good old days of simple good versus evil, heroes versus villains, all attempts to revive or relive these good old days ends in self-destructive failure. At best, these characters escape wounded but alive, and at worst, they die while taking others down with them. Ganondorf's motives are rooted in bitterness that he never got his climactic, epic final battle over the fate of Hyrule, and the apocalypse he kickstarts is caused by the Game & Watch, stated in this universe to be ancient entities from before the Mushroom Kingdom, eager to now wipe it away. In other words, representations of the past trying to erase the possibility of a future. While Bowser misses the good old days, he is content to rest on his laurels after becoming a Buddhist and doesn't cause that much trouble, all things considered, until Ganondorf's plot inspires him to mobilize his army to take over, at least partially as a defensive measure. DDD laments the state of things, but is also happy to adapt, and is described as a relatively stable option for winner of the gang war.
He's disgusting, but he's no tyrant. Might not be such a bad thing.
Mewtwo doesn't get much characterization, so ignoring him, Ganondorf is the crime lord most obsessed with the past, and he is the worst, most destructive of all of them. As for the classic children are the hope for the future trope, the series gives us hints of this with Peach's philosophy of how to hold on to hope.
One child. No matter how far we fall, we're never past redemption, as long as we can hear the laughter of one child.
But it rips this hope away with the reveal that Ness and Lucas were actually the serial killers all along, kids exposed to Kirby's murders and then trained to be psychic assassins by Mewtwo, until Ganondorf tried to take control of them for himself. They murder their victims with sadistic glee, psychically disemboweling them to turn them into taxidermized trophies. A lot of stories about broken worlds have a hope lies with the next generation theme that can sometimes feel hollow if not done well, like the actual main characters are abdicating any responsibility for trying to make things better and putting it on some vague possible future with no specifics of how that's supposed to work. It would have been easy for There Will Be Brawl to do the same, and have Luigi and Mario and Samus and others resign themselves to being too bitter to help the world and put their hopes in children. But this possibility is denied to them, and even the young Red, not a child but still a sunny embodiment of idealism, is killed in episode 9 to nip his burgeoning heroism in the bud. It is in fact up to the jaded current generation to pick up the pieces after everything is over and do the work themselves. Since we leave these characters as they're helping build up a shelter of survivors in Mewtwo's old orphanage, and there's this shot of Leaf giving a crying girl Red's Jigglypuff, there is still the presence of children and the resulting image of hope for renewal. But the responsibility for caring for these children and improving the world is on our heroes. This little girl represents that there is a future to build. She doesn't represent the people who will be forced to shoulder the responsibility of building it. So at the end, There Will Be Brawl seems to say that fixing a broken world means rolling up your sleeves and fixing it, not wallowing in nostalgia or trying to bring back the past, and not just hoping that the kids will be the ones to fix it. The age of heroes is as dead as the princesses they once adventured to save, but that doesn't mean there aren't good deeds to do, however unglamorous they may be. I mentioned earlier that the Mario brothers have sort of surrendered responsibility to Princess Peach before the series begins. Mario even calls her Mama as a pet name, which I'll let the Freudians sort out. Peach routinely chastises the brothers for having given up, and then she is kidnapped and killed. One could say they have lost their mother figure. Perhaps this Nintendo fan series is thus about growing up and stepping up in broader society to be the change you want to see. In the Garage Dwelling Frogs documentary, Matt Mercer and Zach Grafton describe the impetus for the series being, in part, born from young creatives wanting to make their own stuff instead of waiting to get cast or hired in something else. That's the impulse that inspires all sorts of fan films, as well as more wholly original projects. It's the spirit of an uncorporatized internet. Though the actual ending note of the series is not strictly hopeful. It's Kirby, having survived and eaten Ness, escaping the city altogether to eat Masahiro Sakurai and Shigeru Miyamoto. The heroes have not destroyed the source of their disillusionment after all, it's still out there. This could lead to a nihilistic reading of the series overall, that everyone failed and the villain got away to kill again and nothing is solved. But I don't think it erases the hopeful notes at the orphanage. Luigi even affirms to Kirby that he feels he has honored the memories of both Peach and Daisy.
Have you satisfied your princess at last?
I've satisfied them both.
He can move on, even now knowing that Kirby is still out there. Media discussion spaces online have been litigating a sort of sincerity versus irony distinction for the last few years, spurred in part by oversaturation of the MCU's house style of writing. Setting aside my own frustrations with how oversimplified and even misrepresentative this discourse tends to get regarding what is often but not always mere stylistic preferences, it is fair to say that a work relying too heavily on irony and insincerity when depicting fantastical subject matter can feel hollow, embarrassed with itself, like the creators thought themselves above what they were working with. There Will Be Brawl was made with irony. It is a joke how dramatically these men dressed up as the Mario brothers are delivering their lines. But the web series is not embarrassed with itself. Quite the opposite. Meanwhile, sincerity can also be infected with insecurity and hollowness if a work still expresses an inflated sense of self-importance or insists on profundity that is not really there. I don't think this applies to the web series either. As I said before, There Will Be Brawl strikes a precarious balance here. It's self-aware but not self-conscious. It's a work made by scrappy amateurs with, at the time, unrefined but still undeniable talent and passion, making something certainly of its time but in some ways ahead of it. It's incredibly charming, despite and even because of its human imperfections. It's a rumination on hope and the false allure of nostalgia. And it's a web series where a hand-sized Jigglypuff plushie rips Wario to pieces as revenge for him bombing Pokemon trainer Red's house. It's pretty neat. So in the finale, it's established that Mewtwo wore a fancy suit, but in episode 2 we see a portrait of him just as he appears in normal Pokemon without clothes. So does that mean that Mewtwo had a giant nude portrait of himself in this back alley Pokemon arena? Thank you for watching, and extra thanks to my Patreon supporters listed here. Have a good one.